Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very senior professional from Victoria, Australia, Maree Harris. Maree, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ash. Good to be here.
Thank you. Maree is mentor for transformational change. She's a leadership mentor and a facilitator of transformational change, and she's an author. And all of you know, I'm very partial to authors. She's an author of a book titled Lead from Within. So Maree, we'll talk today about mentoring and your book. But before we start on that, tell me a little bit about your own journey.
Well, back in I'll just go to what's relevant about this because I've done so many things in my life. But back in 1989, I set up my own counselling and psychotherapy practice. But within a very few short years, I had managers and leaders coming to me for counselling, because back in that period of time, coaching wasn't really known in Australia anyway. None of them needed counselling. They were all very competent professionals, and I started coaching them. Only had a couple of sessions, most of them. They were, quite competent in what they were doing. Over a period of time, I got more and more. So in 2005, I began to close down my counselling practice, and I set up People Empowered, which is about leadership development. And for the up until COVID, most of it was workshops, masterclasses, 2-day retreats, and a bit of coaching and mentoring. But I didn't go online during COVID because of the particular nature of my work, which is all about self-leadership and developing leaders. But I escalated my mentoring, and it was so successful, and the impact of mentoring on people's leadership was so powerful. That's all I'm doing now. I'm just
Fascinating.
Engaged in developing leaders through mentoring.
Fascinating. And you said you started coaching and counseling, and then you, if I can use the term, pivoted to becoming a mentor.
Yes.
So my question is, how are you differentiating yourself as a mentor, especially now when there are so many coaches around?
Well, one of the things that I think I've got to contribute that does differentiate me is that I've been a therapist, I've been a coach, I've been a mentor. So often when people come even for coaching or mentoring, what they say, like they might come saying they want mentoring, but really they want coaching. And some of them come wanting coaching, and it's more a mentoring experience. Now, the difference for me, and this is just my difference, others would see it quite differently.
Sure.
For me, coaching, in fact, the interesting thing, Ash, is that when men come to me, they ask for coaching. When women come, they ask for mentoring.
How amazing.
And I think it's about, this is how I differentiate it. Coaching is people come with a specific desire to coach. So someone comes and they want to move up the career ladder, and I'm not getting opportunities and promotions. And they want sort of help in being more strategic about how to get there. Whereas someone comes for mentoring and they're more about, they might say something like, look, I'm just not progressing at all in our organisation. I don't think I'm being taken seriously. I see people around me getting all the promotions before me. They haven't got the same experience as I got. So those people, I take more on a journey. So what do you think is happening here? What do you think? And unpacking for them what is happening for them that they're not getting where they want to go. So that's
amazing.
That's the difference for me. Coaching is more strategic. Mentoring is more going on a journey, helping people that they don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. I share my own journey with them. I share my own experience. If it resonates with them, that's very helpful. And most of the people who write a testimonial about my work mention wisdom and insight.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, wonderful.
And I think you would know, as we get older, that's what we've got, isn't it?
Correct.
We've got a lot of wisdom and a lot of insight and experience rather than strategies and techniques.
Well said. Well said. My next question to you, Maree, is what inspired you to focus on transformational change in your practice?
Well, it's transformational change is change at a much deeper level. So I think we've often thought of change in incremental terms. So we're not happy with something that's happening. So we think about it and we decide we're going to make this change. Then we make that one, then we make the next one. Then, that's what we do. Now, it's much more concrete. It's much more transactional. Whereas transformational change is going much deeper. Now, my work with leaders is all about self-leadership. So it's about things like self-awareness, resilience, proactivity. It's about emotional intelligence. It's about all those qualities within a leader that stops them from being effective, or if they're not well developed. And that's the level at which the change has to take place. It has to take place within the leader, hence my book, Lead from Within.
Absolutely.
Because I say that in the sort of very volatile and unpredictable times we're living in, where there are no black and whites, no right and wrongs.
Correct.
How do people, the challenge of leading in those times is extremely, extremely challenging. And so they often, particularly during COVID, that what do we do in this absolutely unprecedented event? But if they can draw on what's within them, that strong sense of self-leadership within them, and they lead from within, they draw on their self-awareness, they draw on their resilience, they draw on their emotional intelligence. So that's what that's the whole focus of my work now.
Wonderful. And when you work with individuals and organizations who are going through transformational change, what are some of the common challenges that you have seen them working with?
Well, I don't work in organizations, for example.
With individuals.
Most of the people that come to me quite individually. Sometimes the organisation will send them and they'll meet the fee for that, but most of them are coming individually. So the as I said, it's the women with me, and it's probably because I'm a woman. Like I'm not saying women are particularly different, but they are looking for something deeper. They're much more reflective about what they are on about than the men that come to me. But I do have male colleagues doing mentoring who are really having quite a powerful impact, drawing men out and helping men to connect with a deeper part of themselves.
Right. Interesting. And, one of the things that I have always seen in my corporate life when it comes to transformation, most people prefer status quo, or maybe even status quo ante. How do you tackle that?
Well, that's what we all want, that, don't we? That's our comfort
Absolutely.
zone.
Absolutely.
And like, change is just something that's very exciting for me. So I'd say the only people that would come to me are the people who don't want the status quo. They want to do something else.
Understand.
They want some new insight. They want some real change. So I think people who come to me are a bit self-selective in that way. But I do a bit of work. When I was running a lot of workshops, a lot of nearly every workshop, there'd be a baby boomer manager get up and really condemn young people and their values and their communication skills and their commitment and their loyalty. And that was about wanting to maintain the status quo. Now, I began to, often I'd say to those, it was not valuable to get into a discussion with them in the session. I'd often go up to them afterwards and say, let's have a coffee. And I'd have a talk to them. And one of the things I often did with them, I'd say, have you got any grandchildren? Oh, yeah, I've got, well, do you know your grandchildren are going to be the leaders of the future?
Correct.
Right. What sort of relationship have you got with your grandchildren? And one fellow sitting there with a Nokia flip phone, and I said, you need to get rid of that Nokia flip phone because you're not going to be able to communicate with your grandchildren.
Absolutely. What a great example. Absolutely.
And often you can get to some of these at that personal change level. You can get to them by talking about their grandchildren and getting them to move that way. And also getting them to think that, look, there's no way you can challenge. Change is the only certainty we've got.
Correct.
And Ash, look, some people are never going to change. They doesn't matter how much coaching they are given, doesn't matter how much mentoring, they are not going to change. And but often my experience is when you begin to take people on a bit of a journey and start asking these questions, is that there comes the point of change for me that I get with people is that aha moment of insight. Oh, that's what's happening.
Fantastic.
That's where we go. That moment. I'm sure you've had that in your work too. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what role does emotional intelligence play in handling transformational change?
Look, I think emotional intelligence it's very tied up with self-awareness, of course, but emotional intelligence is absolutely crucial for leaders at every level of their leadership, really. And coming with transformational change, as I said before, that's a deeper level of change. So they have to have some self-awareness of why that change is needed.
Right.
Like, why do I need to change? Why do I need to change? But then it's, well, what is the feeling for me? What is the emotion for you when you're being asked to change? And to me, that's the very first thing about emotional intelligence is, what am I feeling? What is this feeling I have about, in this situation, change? And examining that and the impact it's having on their leadership, the fear, it's generally all fear.
Wonderful.
Right?
Wonderful. Great response. Sorry, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the really important things that happened for me in developing the emotional intelligence stuff was the work that's been done on leadership with the brain in mind. And particularly the work of David Rock, who's he's an Australian, but he lives in the United States, and he developed what he called neuro leadership. And so when we work with leaders around fear, for example, and let's say fear of change, with the use of MRIs, they've been able to show that the brain lights up, the fear in the brain lights up, whether we've got someone's talking to us about change, or whether someone's got a gun at our head, you know, the physical threat and the emotional threat, the same part of the brain's in operation. And it's really good when I'm working with leaders, it's very good to be able to help them understand that their fear of change is actually coming from their brain. It's not an inadequacy in them. Correct. It's not a failure. It's not that they're stuck in their comfort zone, which is probably what they're feeling, or someone's told them anyway.
Correct.
So they'll often shift. They'll often shift when they understand that more scientific notion about the fear that they've got.
Well said. And what is, in your opinion, is the role of self-awareness and self-reflection when you are working with people for making a transformational change?
Yeah. Well, this is what I'm doing all the time with people. You know, helping them to, because look, Ash, I used to say this in my workshops. There's two workshops going on here. One is what I'm saying to you, and the other one is what you're saying to yourself about what I'm saying to you. And the same in mentoring. So I can tell someone what is, for example, they're having a lot of conflict in their work. Now, I can give them a lot of strategies for managing that conflict. But in their head, they're thinking, oh, she doesn't know this bloke that I'm trying to fix. She doesn't know what's going on. This is not relevant at all to me. So they're feeding stuff to themselves. So all the time, I'm forcing them to reflect on what they're thinking, what they're feeling. Why are you saying that? Developing that self-awareness in them. I'm very big on reflection. People reflecting on their own life, which is about self-awareness. But the other thing that happened, we don't just reflect on what COVID particularly taught us, is we have to reflect in for leaders. Like, let's take COVID. That overnight, leaders were thrown into situations where they had to make decisions on the fly. Correct. Just, you know, they had to reflect in that moment. They couldn't set up a 3-month task force to work out what we do. They had to decide in the next hour what they were going to do. So that reflection in, and again, that's about drawing on their leading from within. You know, the ones that were able to do that most effectively drew on their inner confidence to do that.
Well said, well said. So Maree, now let's move to your book, Lead from Within. Tell me a little bit about your own hypothesis when you wrote this book.
Well, the book really was based on the sort of environment we're now working in. That it's very unpredictable, it's uncertain, it's ambiguous, it's paradoxical. And the whole purpose of that was, how do you lead in that? How do you lead in such, and this was pre-COVID. So nobody, I was talking about something that was quite, you know, minuscule in terms of what we actually faced.
Correct.
And so my belief was that, and I'd seen this with leaders I'd worked with, was those that were self-aware, those that really looked at themselves, understood their strengths and understood what challenged them. And those people were the ones that were most effective in what they did. Their self-awareness meant they knew how they came across to others. They knew the impact, or had a much better idea of the impact they were having on their employees. They were much more resilient, so they could push through. They had a mental toughness and a psychological strength that others did, and it was all coming from within them. It wasn't head stuff. It was right within them. So that's what, and my belief was, and so I call these skills self-leadership skills. And if you can't lead yourself, if you can't manage your emotions,
correct,
then you've no right to expect that you would have the right to lead anybody else. So it was very much about their blind spots, their just becoming, well, more aware of themselves and building up that psychological strength they need to lead through the change. So that was what the book was about. And it's only an ebook, but it's been the foundation of everything I've done since.
How wonderful. I'm asking all my viewers and listeners to go and check out Maree Harris's book, Lead from Within. I will also check it out, because what you're saying is so right, Maree. I've spoken to so many leaders, and they said the most difficult time they faced in their careers was during the pandemic, because they had to keep their flock together. They had to make sure that they delivered bottom lines, and the organization had to keep its head above the water. So thank you. My last question to you, Maree, and this is for thousands of people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your deep understanding of mentoring and of transformational change, what would you say are 3 lessons you would want our young viewers and listeners to take away?
The first thing I'd say to anyone who is in leadership or aspiring to leadership is you can't go it alone. It's too challenging to go it alone and think you can be successful.
Correct.
So getting a mentor or a coach, or it can be, because you mostly pay for a mentor or a coach, but you can get a colleague who you really trust. You can get, if you've got a manager who is exhibiting the qualities that you want to have as a leader, ask that manager if you could spend an hour with them on a regular basis. Get a peer group of people. I've set up peer groups of no more than 4 people who meet on a regular basis and support one another. So don't go it alone would be certainly one of the things that I would do. There's and that's the real personal stuff. That's where you can really get in touch. But there's things like this, avail themselves. There's just so much stuff around podcasts, books. And you were saying they only like short little bits. But the thing is, that's good, but you don't really grow like I'm talking about with snippets.
Correct.
You've got to immerse yourself in a process of growing and changing. So making some commitment to a much longer process. And it can be done listening to podcasts.
Correct.
Get some audio books. Do it while you're exercising.
Yeah.
Use your time very effectively to learn all about this stuff. A third one.
Yeah.
Too sure I've got three, but that's enough, Ash. Two's enough.
Okay, two is enough. Perfectly. So on that note, Maree, and your wonderful lessons, you cannot go it alone. Get yourself a mentor or a coach.
Yes.
And the second one you said, which was so fascinating, immerse yourself in a process of growing and changing. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your own journey. Thank you for speaking to me at such length about mentoring and transformation. I think I learned many new things from you today about transformation. Thank you also for speaking to me about your book. Thank you again, and good luck.
Thank you, Ash. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.